At the beginning of the film, a phone on the table lights up with an alarm set for 6 a.m. A hand reaches out to turn it off, signaling a stormy new day. This male student's name is Gong Min, a student at Daehan High School. For him, going to school every day is like walking into hell because of the school violence here, and he himself is the victim. Stepping into the schoolyard and looking up at the rooftop, he sees his friend, Se-UK, standing there with the intention of committing suicide. Previously, during a lecture, a male student named Ru Dun-hong disobeyed and was disrespectful to the teacher. Unable to tolerate his insolence, Se-UK punched Dun-hong, knocking him down. Speaking of ENGSUB, he is the son of a congressman, so he freely bullies students in the school without any fear. As a result, Se-UK became the new target of bullying by Dun-hong's group, succeeding the previous victim, Gong Min. Dun-hong continuously bullies and humiliates Se-UK in front of everyone. Seeing this, Gong Min goes to report it to a teacher. However, as he is about to do so, he overhears the teachers discussing that they cannot punish ENGSUB because his father's power is too immense. Back to the present, Se-UK looks down from above and decides to jump. A spreading pool of red blood flows right to Gong Min's feet. In the suffocating classroom, Gong Min recalls memories of Se-UK, how a well-behaved student was tortured by Dun-hong's gang until he was physically and mentally broken. It seemed like Se-UK's death would finally bring punishment upon Dun-hong's group. But no, Gong Min once again becomes their primary target for bullying. Unable to bear the bullying any longer, he also contemplates suicide. However, looking down from the height, he gets terrified and abandons the idea. Returning to the classroom, he is kicked to the ground by ENGSUB, Dun-hong's lackey. He claims he has just taken up boxing and needs Gong Min to practice with him. He repeatedly beats Gong Min, even forcing him to weakly strike back. He continuously provokes Gong Min, only to suddenly take a resounding slap that sends him rolling out into the hallway. Looking up, he sees a strange man. ENGSUB immediately charges to attack him, but takes yet another slap and goes flying. Not stopping there, he stubbornly rushes at the man once more. And, just like that, a fatal slap lands squarely on ENGSUB's face. Gong Min is left dazed by the sight. Meanwhile, the man strikes a pose, looking like a hero descended upon the school. Seeing his lackey getting beaten, the gang's leader steps out, signaling the rest of the group to pull out their phones and record, fully confident that the pressure of the cameras will make the man back down. Surprisingly, the man flashes a friendly smile and gently helps the beaten student stand up. Who would have guessed? Just a second later, the smile vanishes, and without a shred of mercy, he delivers a furious punch straight into ENGSUB's face. Under the intense interrogation of the principal, the man calmly pulls out his badge. He is Ha-jin, an inspector from the Educational Rights Protection Bureau. This is a special agency directly under the Ministry of Education, established by the government with a mission to reform and restore the increasingly decaying education system. As an inspector, Ha-jin is granted ultimate powers that go beyond all conventional boundaries. In the principal's office, Ha-jin tells him that he is authorized to use the harshest, unconventional measures to straighten out delinquent students. Starting today, Ha-jin will not only serve as an inspector, but will also take on the role of homeroom teacher for a notoriously troublesome class at this school. Right during his very first roll call, as Uncle Ha-jin reads out each name, everyone answers obediently, until he calls out Se-UK's name. The moment the words leave his mouth, a student in the class makes a mocking, cynical remark, jeering that the boy was slow-witted and couldn't handle the academic pressure, which is why he sought death. Hearing those callous words, Hasan immediately strides over, grabs the brat tightly by the mouth, and drags him forcefully to the front. To teach these brats a lesson in discipline, Hasan orders the entire class to do collective push-ups. However, Dunhong resists. Hasan coldly strides over, grabs Dunhong's head, and slams it hard against the desk. Not stopping there, he swings his hand and delivers a stinging slap to the spoiled boy's face. By lunchtime in the cafeteria, Dunhong's rebellious habits resurface as he shamelessly cuts the line. But unfortunately for him, the person serving lunch today is none other than Hasan. Hasan loudly declares that he must wait in line. Infuriated, Dunhong flips his food tray into the trash can to show defiance. Hasan instantly delivers a sweep kick that sends him sprawling to the ground, looking as pathetic as a clown. He even breaks a mop handle and taps the wooden end loudly against Dunhong's forehead as a warning. At the end of the day, Dunhong leaves without staying behind to clean up, and he even threatens Gong Min. He vents all his frustration onto Gong Min. That very evening, Hasan goes straight to the private residence of Assemblyman Wu, Dunhong's father. At the house, Uncle Hasan bluntly informs him that Dunhong left on his own accord before completing his punishment, so he needs to return to school to finish the job. Hearing Hasan's words, the congressman burst into a scoffing laugh. However, the moment Dunhong mentions Se-yuk's death, the old man's expression completely changed. Ignoring the congressman's stunned and bewildered gaze, Hasan casually grabbed Dunhong by the collar and dragged him right back to the school. In the dead of night, the powerful, silver-spoon young master was forced to diligently scrub toilets until his arms were completely exhausted. In a fit of resentment, he came up with a despicable scheme: injure his own head to pin all the blame on Hasan. The next morning, Assemblyman Wu personally shows up at the school, furiously demanding that Hasan explain the injury on his precious son's forehead. It turns out that last night, Dunhong staged the whole thing, intentionally slamming his own head against the toilet bowl to create injuries in order to frame Hasan for abuse. Facing the accusation, Hasan only responds with a calm smile. He confidently declares that as a teacher, he will never tremble before any powerful force or unruly student. As the incident escalates further, the delinquents shift their target to a timid student named Honggu. They are furious, believing that Honggu is the undercover agent who submitted the complaint to the Protection Bureau, causing Hasan to be deployed here. Driven into a corner, the young student takes desperate steps up to the school rooftop. Standing precariously on the edge of the building, Honggu is about to let everything go. But at that exact life-or-death moment, Hasan's firm hand tightly grabs him, pulling him forcefully back. He speaks in a stern voice, advising Honggu absolutely not to give up on his fate. He hopes the boy will keep his faith that, in this harsh world, there still exist honest, brave adults who are ready to sacrifice themselves to protect vulnerable children. To help Honggu clear away the gloomy clouds, Hasan drags him along for a jog to relieve stress. As night falls, the teacher and student sit side by side at a convenience store over steaming cups of noodles. He personally peels a boiled egg for his student, gently encouraging him never to lose hope. Hasan assures Honggu that, from this moment on, he has a support system as solid as a mountain. In another development, Assemblyman Wu seeks out Minister Choi, Hasan's ultimate superior at the Educational Rights Protection Bureau and the current Minister of Education. Minister Choi is the mastermind behind the Protection Bureau, a special agency born to perform a major surgery on a decaying educational system. Showing no deference, Assemblyman Wu drops threats against the minister, bluntly declaring that he will use any means necessary to protect his son. However, just a few days later, a series of shocking scandals involving this assemblyman are suddenly exposed right on television. The most shocking twist is that the person personally blowing the whistle is none other than Minister Choi. During the press conference, he admits that he had endured hardships and bided his time for 2 long years to bring this protection bureau to life. During that time, he had secretly gathered tens of thousands of pieces of evidence regarding the violations and dark secrets of the political elite, and, of course, Assemblyman Wu was a big fish caught right in the net. When his father's protective shield crumbles, Assemblyman Wu is immediately handcuffed for investigation. As a consequence, Dunhong's school violence crimes are also dragged into the light. At this moment, in the minister's office, Hasan is turning on the TV to watch the news about this assemblyman. It turns out that Hasan is not only a subordinate inspector, but also the minister's son-in-law. The tables have turned and the wind has shifted. In the blink of an eye, from a backed bully, Dunhong becomes a bottom feeder despised by the whole school. Still holding onto his delusional arrogance, he refuses to accept defeat. As for Gong Min, he stands in the schoolyard, looking up at the rooftop and remembering Se-UK. Hasan walks over to comfort him. Gong Min says that there was a time he thought Se-UK's suicide would be a good thing, because once he died, those guys would be investigated and the violence would end. However, things didn't go the way he wanted, and he feels guilty towards Se-UK. Hasan comforts him and says it wasn't his fault. As for Dunhong, driven into a corner, he brings an entire can of gasoline into the school, splashing it all over the room. Just as he is about to light the fire, Hasan appears like a ghost. He delivers a knockout kick to the young master, then coldly flicks a lighter and throws it straight into the puddle of gasoline. The flames erupt violently, swallowing the room. Surrounded by a roaring sea of fire, for the first time in his life, Dunhong tastes absolute horror. Waiting until Dunhong screams and begs desperately, Hasan finally moves to extinguish the fire. Grabbing the culprit by the collar, he growls, "Now, have you tasted the exact flavor of despair that the deceased student had to endure?" As everything flashes back to the past, that ill-fated male student had actually been tormented by Dunhong's gang for a long time. The boy's heartbroken father could not swallow this bitter pill. He repeatedly filed complaints and held protests to demand justice for his own flesh and blood. He wants Dunhong to look straight at his crimes and pay a fitting price. Under the powerful intervention of the Protection Bureau, Dunhong's network of violence is completely dismantled, and each member is thrown into a juvenile detention center. Their demonic acts are all exposed on the Bureau's homepage for the entire nation to witness. The case closes to the astonishment of the public, but for Hasan, this is only the warm-up. On the hill, Hasan and the minister visit the grave of a young woman together. She was Hasan's wife and also the minister's daughter. Following their initial victory in the campaign to eradicate school violence, the Department for the Protection of Pedagogical Rights immediately found itself in the eye of a storm of conflicting public opinions. One side hailed them as resilient saviors bringing justice, while the other fiercely protested, accusing the organization of abusing its power to oppress students. The wave of outrage even drove extremists to the streets in mass protests, loudly demanding the dissolution of the department. Standing before that chaotic vortex, Minister Choi and Ha-jin remained unfazed, their composure completely unshaken. Surrounded by a swarm of reporters questioning the use of violence and the violation of students' human rights, Minister Choi did not dodge the issue, but instead bluntly exposed the dark, corrupt underbelly plaguing schools. He firmly declared, "The Bureau for the Protection of Pedagogical Rights does not favor teachers, nor does it defend students. They only stand on the side of vulnerable victims and protect the sacred right to education." Meanwhile, in the office of another congressman, everyone was celebrating because, thanks to the Bureau for the Protection of Pedagogical Rights, they had eliminated a campaign rival. However, they were also concerned about the true power of the Bureau. Scene change, a male student named Bong Kuin-dae was creeping his way to school. Scene change to Chun High School of Technology, dubbed the #1 gangster training ground, and sitting comfortably in the top 3 most notorious hoodlum schools in South Korea. Having just crawled back up and walked a few steps, this newbie unluckily bumped right into a big shot bully. He reluctantly emptied his wallet to pay the protection fee in exchange for peace. Upon stepping into the classroom, the young lad suffered another psychological shock seeing his classmates covered in tattoos and puffing out cigarette smoke just like real-world gangsters. The delinquents in class didn't even bother to bring books to school, yet they arrogantly threatened and forced the teacher to photocopy documents to serve them. As soon as the teacher was out of sight, the whole gang quickly grabbed their mechanical tools to go engage in a bloody battle with another department. A horrific grand war immediately broke out between the automotive department faction and the electrical department faction. Some wielded wrenches and screwdrivers, while others carried entire technical models as weapons. Both sides rushed into close-quarters combat, creating an earth-shattering brawl that looked straight out of a movie theater action film. The newly transferred student unluckily took a devastating, straight punch from the very guy who had just collected his protection money. Fortunately, amidst the chaos, he managed to find an ally. This friend was named Hong-ju, a classmate from the automotive department. Hong-ju explained the whole situation to the rookie. These brats were fighting to the death just to compete for a spot as a top boss's underling. Standing out in the brawl were short-haired Sung Hwan, the boss of the automotive department, and ponytail-wearing In Byum, the kingpin of the electrical department. In the principal's office, the Bureau for the Protection of Pedagogical Rights had already arrived at the school. However, the principal still appeared extremely worried for their safety. The small-time thugs in the school, desperate to be recruited by Jeon-woo, did not hesitate to rush into bloody brawls just to build a reputation. Even a physical education teacher, who was a former national judo athlete, suffered a broken collarbone when stepping in to break up their fighting. However, Huzin simply replied calmly, he alone would be more than enough to handle it. Back to the students, after the automotive department faction lost the battle, furious over losing their spot, the automotive boss turned his anger onto his own classmates, specifically targeting the nerdy Hong-ju and the newbie Kuin-dae. He brutally forced these two gentle students into a one-on-one duel. Whoever lost would be turned into a living punching bag for the whole gang to practice on. Hong-ju whispered in Kuin-dae's ear, telling him to just go ahead and strike because he was already too used to being a punching bag. Left with no choice, Kuin-dae had to push Hong-ju, sending him tumbling onto the floor. Immediately, Hong-ju became the target, enduring every punch from the thugs, and even had to rate how strong their punches were. After school, a guilt-ridden Kuin-dae helped support Hong-ju as they walked home. Bringing Hong-ju all the way back home and receiving an invitation to come inside, Kuin-dae hesitated for a moment but stepped through the door anyway. Glancing around, he couldn't help but stand frozen in astonishment at the car blueprints covering the walls, suddenly realizing the burning fire of passion and dedication that his new friend held for the automotive world. While Hong-ju was busy cooking noodles in the kitchen, Gun-dae asked softly, wondering why someone like him wouldn't choose a more peaceful environment to pursue his studies. Hongju then opened up about his hardships. His family was dirt poor, so where would he get the money to attend expensive schools? When his mother returned and saw her son bringing a friend over, she enthusiastically invited Gun-dae to stay and cooked a delicious meal for him. Catching sight of Hongju carefully stuffing newspaper into his mother's damp shoes, Gun-dae deeply felt that this was an incredibly filial son. The next morning, Inspector Huzin officially showed up at the school, determined to root out this entire mess once and for all. Upon arriving at the classroom, he saw Hongju hesitating to go inside. He comforted Hongju, assuring him that from now on he could study to his heart's content, so he should feel safe coming to school. Just as he stepped foot inside, he witnessed the rookie Gun-dae being beaten black and blue by the gang of thugs. Suddenly, the young lad Gun-dae whispered the code word, "One flew over the cuckoo's nest," and subtly reminded him to flap his wings to respond to the password. It turned out this kid was an undercover agent planted by the Bureau to gather evidence. Recognizing one of his own, Huzin smiled faintly and quietly asked him if he could run fast. Receiving the order from his boss, Gun-dae immediately put on an act, rushing frantically into the cafeteria, cursing at the whole crowd, and sticking up his middle fingers to provoke them. He successfully lured the entire gang of delinquents to chase him hot on his heels right into the gymnasium. Once the prey had all entered the cage, Huzin locked the door from the inside and confidently declared himself as an educational inspector from the Bureau for the Protection of Pedagogical Rights. Unexpectedly, the brats didn't flinch at all and even threatened to take care of him too, boldly claiming that at worst, they would just get expelled and that would be it. Huzin offered them 3 choices. First, obediently throw up and return all the tax money that citizens paid for them to go to school, and they would be free to drop out. Second, knock him out and walk proudly out the door. Before the third choice could even be uttered, the young lambs frantically rushed in, looking to eat the inspector alive. Unfortunately, the speed and moves of these brats were nothing more than amateur hour in Huzin's eyes. He easily dodged the attacks, casually beating the whole crowd black and blue, and even had enough leisure to use a pen to doodle on each of their faces as a mockery. Sweeping away the trash blocking his path, Huzin leisurely flipped over his final card. Everyone was forced to sit down obediently and complete the course. A harsh schedule akin to martial law was instantly imposed on the room. Closing out the orientation session with an iron fist, Huzin had just turned his back to walk away when the 2 bosses suddenly drew their weapons and frantically rushed in for a sneak attack from behind. However, he effortlessly neutralized the deadly strikes, grabbed them both, and knocked them out cold in an instant. Just as the bodies collapsed, the teacher walked into the room and the lecture officially began. But when the teacher began the lecture, the automotive department boss made an excuse about not having a textbook. Huzin immediately punished them by forcing the entire crowd to handcopy the material, just like back in the ancient Joseon era. Seeing this, the electrical department boss threw another tantrum, claiming he didn't have a pen. The inspector, with a stone-cold face, replied, "If you don't have a pen, cut your own hand and use blood to write." Sure enough, just 5 seconds later, the boss was bent over copying the lesson with his pinky finger wrapped in a stark white bandage. Having enjoyed less than an hour of peace, the automotive department boss threw another tantrum, shouting that learning a few words was useless and that going out to hustle for money was much more practical. Hearing this, Huzin decided to indulge them, herding everyone out to the practice garage to test their skills in car repair and electrical circuit wiring. The trouble was, These guys usually only cared about hacking each other to pieces, so they didn't have a single word in their heads, let alone know how to fix a car. Hearing them swear in resistance, Huzin immediately grabbed the two bosses by the scruff of their necks and threw them straight into the car. This time, without even lifting a finger, he showed off his superb drift skills, slamming on the gas and speeding at breakneck velocity. The screeching turns and sharp corners left the two thugs scared out of their wits, their faces turning ghost white without a single drop of blood left. The two thugs in the back of the car screamed in utter terror. As the final, wind-slitting drift came to an end, the two bosses went completely limp, vomiting right on the spot. Meanwhile, the small-time lackeys outside watched with jaws dropped in astonishment, simultaneously bursting into thunderous applause, deeply admiring their badass teacher's skill. As it turned out, Huzin was formerly an elite Special Forces soldier. 3 officials were meeting to discuss Huzin's information. The thugs were now sitting obediently in the classroom. However, the head of the electrical department flew into a rage and threatened Hongju, suspecting that he had snitched to the bureau. Fortunately, Uncle Huzin and Kuinde arrived to the rescue. That evening, Uncle Huzin sat outside to keep watch over the students. Because they had already scheduled an interview with the big boss Kwon Huk, the two leaders forced Kuinde to pry open the door and help them sneak out of the school. Kuinde, completely clueless about what was happening, was also dragged along by them. The moment they sneaked into the bar, they tearfully ranted about all of today's unfair grievances to their big brother Kwon Huk. As a man who valued his pride above all else, there was no way the big boss would let his subordinates be so humiliatingly trampled upon. His ego wounded, he took his lackeys up to the photo room to take a gang commemorative picture. Back in the classroom, Huzin took attendance and found that the two thugs along with Kuinde were nowhere to be seen. Just at that moment, the two thugs swaggered inside, while the big boss revved the engine of a high-capacity motorcycle and drove it straight into the middle of the classroom. Facing Huzin, he casually puffed on a cigarette to intimidate and provoke him. After a few opening words of trash talk, a fiery combat officially exploded between the budding gangster and the inspector uncle. Knocked off balance by the very first move, Kwon Huk furiously rushed forward, grabbing Huzin and slamming his head hard against the ground. Seeing the uncle lying unconscious on the floor, he bragged and celebrated, cheering along with his lackeys. However, Huzin only smirked slightly, holding his head and feigning a feint to trick the enemy. While the whole gang was cheering triumphantly and dancing in celebration, Huzin suddenly sprang up, clapping his hands loudly to mock them, leaving the entire crowd frozen in their tracks. He leisurely threw a taunt at the big boss Kwon Huk, calling him a big head with the brains of a grape. Huzin laid his cards on the table. He had intentionally set a trap to lure him here to serve as a visual teaching aid to deter these young punks. For someone like him, he didn't even bother using his full strength. Just a light flick to the forehead was enough to send the big boss flying and knock him out cold. Determined to root out the problem completely, Huzin grabbed the unconscious Kwon Huk by the scruff of his neck and threw him outside the school gate to provoke the gangsters backing him up. Meanwhile, on the television news, the assemblyman was questioning the minister about the Bureau for the Protection of Pedagogical Rights, making malicious remarks aimed at dissolving the Bureau. However, the minister was very confident in the Bureau and was not afraid of those malicious remarks. At the school gate, Huzin raised his voice, warning the gangsters that they were strictly forbidden from setting foot on the school grounds. Otherwise, a brutal war would truly begin. Naturally, the notorious gangsters were not easily intimidated. Brandishing daggers and iron bars, They roared and rushed forward, intending to turn Hazin into mincemeat. But the inspector was a man of his word. He immediately flipped on War God mode, striking lightning fast and punching each of them bloody without an ounce of mercy. The delinquent buds watched the scene drenching in cold sweat, thinking to themselves, what kind of monstrous teacher handles things with even more cruelty and decisiveness than real gangsters? By the time the entire gang lay defeated at Hazin's feet, the two bosses who used to rule the school were now so terrified that they practically wet their pants, trembling violently as they fell to their knees to beg for their lives. Hazin coldly pointed his finger toward the real victim they needed to repent to, the poor student, Hongju. The two bullies scrambled over, bowing their heads to beg for Hongju's forgiveness. At first, out of habit, the timid nerd still mumbled, "It's okay." But when Hazin asked him again, "Are you really okay?" Hongju burst into tears. All the humiliation and pent-up resentment he had suppressed for so long finally came pouring out. In front of all the students, Hazin raised his voice in warning. "If you guys don't want to learn, then get the hell out so others can, but absolutely never get in the way of someone else's future." At this moment, the police also arrived to clean up the battlefield, hauling all the big-shot gangsters off to the station. After he timidly recounted the expenses and losses incurred during this mission, regarding both his physical appearance and his money. But there was no need to worry just yet, as Minister Choi was famous for being a generous boss, ready to spend big and fully compensate all damages for his diligent employee. Meanwhile, in the assemblyman's office, the file containing information on Hazin was laid out on his desk. Photos of a woman's funeral showed Hazin as a mourner, with the minister standing behind him. In another scene, Hazin was sitting quietly, his sorrowful eyes fixed on the portrait of his late fiancée. As it turned out, her memory was the ultimate reason that drove him to join the Bureau for the Protection of Pedagogical Rights.